Hey everyone, and welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5340, Introduction to Public Policy and Management. Today, we're diving into a required reading, Chapter 10 from the book Race and Social Equity, A Nervous Area of Government. We're going to break down how governments across the globe are trying, or struggling, to deal with their own complicated histories of discrimination. So let's get right into it. So the chapter kicks things off with this incredibly stark quote from Martin Luther King Jr., and it's there for a reason. It immediately forces you to think about the core idea of this whole chapter. That huge, often uncomfortable gap between what a government says is legal and what is actually just. That tension right there is the key to understanding everything that follows. And that tension leads us straight into the first major concept from the book, what the author calls the nervous area of government. And as we're about to see, this isn't something unique to just one country. No, it's a challenge that democratic nations all over the world are facing. So what does that really mean? Well, at its heart, it's all about contradiction. It's when a country has, a beautiful constitution that talks all about freedom and equality for everybody, but its actual day-to-day reality, the policies, the laws, the way things are run, tells a totally different story, one that keeps these old injustices alive. The book uses this amazing metaphor to describe it. Inequities cast a long shadow. I think that's such a powerful way to put it. It helps you visualize how discriminatory things that were once perfectly legal still shape our society today. The laws might have changed, but that shadow sticks around. So if history casts this long, dark shadow, what can we actually do about it? How do you let some light in? Well, the chapter looks at one specific tool governments can use to try and bridge that gap between their values and their actions, the formal public apology. But, and this is a big but, not all apologies are created equal. According to the research, for a government apology to be truly meaningful, it has to have these 6 distinct parts. It's not enough to just say, "We're sorry." You have to actually take responsibility, admit what you did was wrong, recognize the suffering it caused, promise you'll never do it again, and, this one's absolutely crucial, offer some kind of real repair. And this table really shows the sheer scale of what we're talking about. These are not minor slip-ups. We're looking at apologies for things like the internment of 110,000 Japanese Americans, the entire brutal system of apartheid in South Africa, and the forced removal of around 100,000 Aboriginal children from their families in Australia. These are profound, generation-defining harms. So let's look at the data on how these apologies actually stack up. The analysis found that, about 85% of them do assign blame and promise not to do it again. And a pretty solid 77% even offers some form of repair. But look at this last bar. Only 38% included any kind of praise for the minority group itself. That's a really surprising detail, right? It suggests that actually acknowledging the resilience and contributions of the victims is a much rarer step. So from here, the chapter kind of zooms out and gives us a global snapshot. It makes it really clear that this nervous area of government isn't just some abstract academic theory. You can see it playing out in very real and tangible ways in countries all over the world. Let's start with Australia. A huge part of the historical basis for inequity there was this legal idea of terra nullius, which literally means land of no one. It was used to basically erase Aboriginal claims to their own land. You combine that with political exclusion that lasted all the way until 1983, and you've got the recipe for some deep structural problems that still exist today. And what does that long shadow look like in the real world? It looks like this: a 17-year gap in life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. That single, shocking number shows you that these historical policies have literal life-and-death consequences right now. Okay, now let's hop over to Canada, a country that has this strong international reputation for being super tolerant. And, in many ways, that's deserved. But the data tells a more complicated story. Despite that history, you still see these really significant gaps in what people earn. The point is, even in a country that's seen as a model, the data shows that structural inequity is still a powerful force. And our third case study is South Africa, which the text holds up as an extreme, but really vital example. The key fact to wrap your head around here is that the Black majority couldn't even vote until 1994. I mean, that is not ancient history. That's well within the lifetimes of so many of us. And this right here, this just brilliantly illustrates the legacy of that system. Even after apartheid was legally dismantled, just look at these poverty rates. 61% for Africans compared to 1% for whites.
This data is such a stark reminder of how deeply those economic structures get baked into a society and how long that shadow can last.
So, after walking us through all these global examples of the problem, the chapter makes a really important shift. It moves from just diagnosing the illness to looking at the treatment. It explores a major international framework that's designed to give us a path forward. And this is it, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. You can basically think of it as the global gold standard. It's a legally binding treaty from the UN, and it has this incredibly ambitious goal to be a universal tool to fight racial discrimination everywhere in every form it takes. The chapter boils this whole big convention down to 4 key principles that are super relevant for public policy. First, the goal isn't just to reduce discrimination, it's to eliminate it. Second, it says a country's history is totally relevant to its policies today. Third, it puts the responsibility to fix things squarely on the government. And fourth, and this one is huge for policy debates, it says the solutions don't have to be race-blind. In fact, this specific quote from the convention's text is really the key takeaway here. It explicitly says that countries should take special and concrete measures to protect certain racial groups. What that means is that the international framework itself says that targeted, race-conscious policies are sometimes necessary to correct these historical injustices. All right, so this brings us right back to where we started. We're circling back to that central challenge that's been woven through this whole chapter, the challenge of bridging that democratic gap. And this is really the whole thing in a nutshell. The core challenge is this 3-part disconnect. You've got a nation's high-minded democratic ideals on one side, then you have its historical record of legal discrimination on the other. And the result of those two things clashing is the structural inequality that we can actually measure in the world today. The real work is trying to reconnect all 3. And that just leaves us with this final question to think about. This chapter has shown us the problem, and it's explored some of the tools, like apologies and international agreements. But the question really remains for all of us to ponder. If history's shadow is really so long and so dark, what are the best and most effective tools we have to finally truly let in the light?